In a distant spiral of stars, the galaxy had grown used to neat borders and polite wars. Yet beyond those borders, there drifted a blue-green world whose people were whispered about with fear and wonder. They called that world Earth, and they called its children humanity. The elders of many star nations had watched humans from afar for ages. They saw small ships dart into storms that would tear other vessels apart. They saw mining crews dive into dying suns to pull out rare matter. They saw explorers walk onto worlds where gravity crushed steel. And always humans came back scarred but smiling. To the rest of the galaxy, such behavior looked like madness, yet to humans, it was simply living. One cycle, a coalition of alien powers decided that humanity had grown too bold. They feared that these stubborn creatures would one day reshape the balance of all known space. So they sent a vast armada toward Earth, a storm of metal and light that blotted out stars as it moved. The coalition believed that a swift, overwhelming strike would force humans into submission. On Earth, leaders gathered in cities and in hidden bunkers. They knew their fleets were smaller and their weapons weaker on paper. But they also knew something the coalition did not. Humans had survived plagues, world wars, and the endless cruelty of their own history. They had learned to turn desperation into invention and pain into resolve. A pilot named Adam stood on a launch deck, watching the sky darken as alien. Ships took their positions. He was not the strongest or the smartest among his people. He was simply one of many who had chosen to fight. Around him, technicians moved with quiet focus, each of them carrying their own fears and hopes. Adam thought of the long line of ancestors behind him, farmers, soldiers, dreamers, all of them pushing forward so that he could stand here now. The first alien volley struck Earth orbit with blinding force. Stations shattered and debris rained like fire, yet human defense grids flared to life. Crude compared to alien technology, but driven by sheer stubborn will. Missiles screamed through space, guided by algorithms written by tired engineers who refused to give up. Some hit their marks and alien cruisers burned on the ground. Civilians took shelter. But even their humanity fought in its own way. Factories shifted to war production. Scientists worked without sleep. Children were moved to safety by volunteers who sang to keep fear at bay. The entire planet became a single beating heart of resistance. The coalition commanders were confused. They had expected surrender or collapse. Instead, they met a tide of relentless counterattack. Human ships used unpredictable maneuvers, ramming when weapons failed, boarding when holes were breached. Every loss only seemed to fuel greater fury. Adam flew his small fighter through a cloud of wreckage. Alarms blaring, he saw an alien dreadship looming ahead. A giant of dark metal, his weapons were almost empty, but he pushed forward anyway. Not because he thought he would win alone, but because every second he bought mattered. He fired his last missiles and watched as they struck a weak point revealed by earlier damage. A chain reaction rippled across the dreadship, and it split apart in silent fire. Across the battlefield, similar acts of reckless courage unfolded. A human engineer named Leo rerouted power through his own suit to keep a shield online, sacrificing himself so that a hospital ship could escape. A medic named Ava ran through falling debris to pull wounded soldiers to safety. Her hands shaking but never stopping. These were not legendary heroes. They were ordinary people pushed to extraordinary acts as the days of battle wore on. The coalition began to realize a terrible truth. Humanity did not fight to conquer or to dominate. It fought to survive and to protect. And that made it far more dangerous than any empire driven by pride. Humans would not stop until either they or their enemy was gone. The coalition tried to deploy a final superweep aimed at Earth itself. A device meant to crack the planet, yet human spies had already uncovered its design. A group of volunteers launched a daring raid on the alien flagship. Among them was Adam, whose fighter had been salvaged and repaired. They slipped through enemy lines using a stolen jump code and burst into the heart of the armada. Inside the flagship, humans fought in tight corridors against towering alien guards, their smaller size and quick reflexes turning into an advantage. They moved like ghosts through the metal halls, planting charges and hacking systems. Adam reached the core chamber where the super weapon was being primed. Wounded and exhausted, he still forced himself forward. He knew that if he failed, Billions would die. With a final surge of effort, Adam triggered the overload sequence. Alarms wailed as the flagship began to tear itself apart. He barely escaped in a shuttle as the massive vessel exploded. Taking the super weapon and several nearby cruisers with it, the blast lit up space like a new sun. Seeing their greatest weapon destroyed, the coalition lost its nerve. Their fleets began to retreat, not in orderly formation, but in panicked flight. Human ships pursued only long enough to ensure they would not return. Then they turned back to their wounded home. Earth was battered and scarred, but it still stood. Cities were damaged, many lives were lost, yet the spirit of humanity burned brighter than ever. People emerged from shelters to help one another, to rebuild, to mourn, and to remember. They did not celebrate the destruction of their enemies. They honored the courage of their own. In the wider galaxy, the story of that battle spread. Alien civilizations spoke of the monstrosities of humanity, not as beasts of cruelty, but as beings capable of enduring horrors and still choosing to protect what they loved. They learned that beneath the fragile skin and small frames of humans lay a will that could shake stars. Adam returned to Earth a quiet hero. He did not seek fame. He simply wanted to walk under open skies again. He knew that future threats would come, that the universe was vast and often hostile. But he also knew that humanity would face them together. And so, the legend of Earth grew. Not as a world of endless war, but as a home of relentless hope. A place where, even in the darkest moments, people would stand up and fight for a better tomorrow. The galaxy would never forget what happened when it tried to break humanity, and found instead an unyielding force that refused to be extinguished.